Hey guys, welcome back. We are in the meat section. Let's dig in here a little bit. We're going to find out. There's not a lot of spiritual undertones to what we've read today. We will be reading the mashup version so that we can put these scenes together. It starts that when Herod died. So we've got Herod dying. This is going to be complicated just for a second. We got Herod dying around 4 BC. So if he died at 4 BC, that means Jesus had to have been born around 6 BC or before, right? If we do the math appropriately. So technically, according to the calendar, that wasn't quite right. Jesus was actually born about 6 years before he was actually born. So doing the math on that, I know that they figured it out when they did the calendar, but they had already had it done so much work on it that they just left it. This is actual factual stuff. So in all actuality, Jesus was born probably closer to the 6 to 7 BC, maybe even 8 BC, based off of Herod the Great dying. At 4 BC, he died of some kind of uncurable disease, according to what I've been able to find out. Now, he was known as Herod the Great, and Rome trusted him. Rome. So remember that they were under Roman rule and authority, but they did not trust his sons. So because of this, Herod knew before he died that Rome would not give any of his successors or his successor as much power as he had. So he ended up dividing up his kingdom. So because he divided up his kingdom, we have 3 rulers then. 3, if you would call them, puppet kings in this region. Because he had 3 sons. There was Archelaus, who we're reading about today, and he was over Judea, Samaria, and Idumea. And this is the regions around Jerusalem and in Jerusalem. He was probably chosen for this because he was most like his father. And in seeing that he was most like his father is probably why they didn't want to return to Bethlehem, and the angel warned him, and Joseph was afraid. So that would make sense. The other 2 sons, there was Herod Antipas, and he got Galilee and Perea. And that was the area around Nazareth. That's going to be Herod Antipas is where Jesus was going to grow up under his jurisdiction, but ultimately under Roman jurisdiction. And then there was Herod Philip II, and they gave him trachonitis. So not much, which is an interesting story. We're going to learn more about him later because he didn't receive much, and then what he even had was kind of taken from him. We'll read about that later. But reading through this passage, just a little background on Nazareth. From what I read, it sits or sat in a kind of a hilly area of southern Galilee. We've looked at that. It's kind of southwest of the center of Galilee, the Sea of Galilee. This was a small town, but people in Nazareth had constant contact from people all over the world. People went through there as trade routes, and they seemed to have a good grip on what was going on in the world. World news reached them quickly. How do people act when they've received news that nobody else knows? They kind of act like they're more independent, like they got a one-up on you sometimes. And that's the way they were kind of viewed. It wasn't necessarily because they were a nothing town. It was because they were a town that was filled with people that passed through it all the time. And they had a good grip on what was going on in the world around them. So because of that, they kind of got a bad rap from the Jews around them. That's why whenever they talked about it with Nathaniel, he says, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Remember when we talked about that earlier? But the truth is, something did come out of Nazareth that was pretty great, and that would be Jesus. That would be the Messiah. So we have to be careful when we make judgments on places or on people that it's just best if we don't judge people, and we just trust in God and love people. He asked us to love, not judge, to show mercy, not sacrifice. There's all kinds of things that he talks about. But when we read this, Herod died 4 BC. An angel came to Joseph. An angel comes to him twice. Once saying that he could return, and then saying that you got to go somewhere else. It's interesting that he says go to the land of Israel, but he's not specific about it. He was specific about fleeing to Egypt. And it was no big deal going to Egypt, by the way. There were a bunch of Jews that had still lived there or had colonies there. So that was not like a scary thing that they were the only ones there. They probably maybe even knew somebody that lived there. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just guessing. But point being that Mary and Joseph, imagine this is not exactly how they probably saw their first couple years of marriage going. And by that I mean they're definitely not expecting what they were doing to happen. To move like they moved, and to have a child, and that child be the Son of God, and then Herod the king trying to kill that child, and them having to flee in the middle of the night. Like, this is a lot going on. What about the shepherds? What about the wise men? What about Simeon? What about Anna? What about all of these things that took place that are unexplainable? What about the angel coming multiple times to visit them? And this is what we have recorded. Could there have been other events? I don't know, but this is what we have recorded. So when we're reading through this, we have to remember that one, they were chosen. It wasn't anything that they had done. It's all things that God was doing and had done. So as we look at Joseph getting his family and returning, and then ultimately ending up in Nazareth, this is a big deal as it fulfills prophecies, even prophecies that they probably didn't know about as they were probably trying to return to Bethlehem. So as we're reading through these passages, as we're looking at these things, let's notice that God wins. Prophecies are fulfilled. There's nothing that Herod can do about it, or Archelaus, or anyone. That God uses angels to protect us and to help guide us to where we're supposed to go. That God sends them, that they do not go and do things on their own. Now we know that they do, but not the ones that God sent. God protects his people. He protects his son. He protects Mary and Joseph. Even though we don't know how everything ends up with them, we know that they're loved, they're protected, and we know that Jesus grows up in this town, which means that as we look at this, because the next time we visit Jesus, he's going to be a little bit older. And when we're looking at this and reading through this, as Jesus grows up in this place, that means that he grows up around these other people, that they know him, they know of him, they have talked to him, he's probably helped them with something, they've seen him at synagogue. There's all of these types of things that they all know Jesus as a boy like any other boy. But Mary knew that he was different. She treasured these things up in her heart, and because of that, they had other kids, but I wonder how different Jesus was. I wonder if there was still a stigma around Mary and Joseph because they had a child before they were married. I don't know. We don't know a lot of things, and we could go on with this forever. I'll stop here in a minute, but it's cool how God works, and it's unexpected in how he works and in the way that he works. And if he sends you somewhere, you go, and if he tells you return, you return. And he speaks to people differently. In these instances, an angel was sent. In these instances, visions were had. For you, it might be in prayer. It might be reading through the Word. It might just be tugged on by the Spirit. We don't know. But what we do know is that God is still at work, that he's never stopped working. He never will stop working. And that his will is always ultimately done. All right, that's it for the meat. I know it wasn't too meaty. It was more historical, but that is kind of what this was based on. The mashup was great. It helped out a lot. And I'll see you guys tomorrow.